Terrifying creatures from forgotten folklore. Have you ever felt a chill run down your spine for no reason at all? That feeling like you are being watched, even when you are completely alone. For thousands of years, humans have told stories to explain the darkness that lies just beyond the firelight. These are tales of creatures born from our deepest and most primal fears. While some monsters are famous, many have been lost to time, their stories buried in forgotten folklore. Tonight we will dig them up. We are going to explore the terrifying creatures that haunted the nightmares of our ancestors, the monsters that time has tried to forget. Before we begin, I have a question for you. What is a local legend or scary story from your hometown? Let me know in the comments below. I would love to read about the things that scare you. And if you enjoy diving into the unknown and exploring the darkness, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You don't want to miss what is coming. Now, turn down the lights and let us begin. The ocean has always been a source of deep fear for those who live near it. Its depths are a mystery, and its power is absolute. In the coastal communities of Scotland, particularly in the Orkney Islands, there was a fear that was more specific than just the sea itself. It was a fear that had a name and a form, a creature so foul that its very name was not spoken lightly. They called it the Nuckelavee. This creature was considered one of the most terrifying monsters in all of Scottish folklore. It was a sea devil, a being of pure evil that brought plague and destruction wherever it went. The Nuckelavee was a creature of two worlds, but it belonged to neither. It was primarily a sea creature, but it could also walk on land, bringing its terror from the waves to the shore. Its appearance is the stuff of nightmares, a grotesque fusion of man and horse. Imagine a horse but with skin so thin you can see the black blood pulsing through its yellow veins. Its muscles are visible, writhing like snakes beneath the translucent flesh. It has a single, massive eye in the center of its head, an eye that burns with a red flame filled with pure malice. From its wide mouth, it breathes a vapor so toxic that it could wilt crops, sicken livestock, and kill people. This was the equine part of the Nuckelavee. Fused to its back, as if growing from its spine, was the torso of a man. This upper body had no legs of its own, but its arms were so long they could reach the ground on either side of the horse's body. The head of this man's torso was massive, rolling from side to side as if it were too heavy for the neck to support. Like the horse, this part of the creature had no skin, just raw exposed muscle and sinew. There was no skin to protect it, which was both a horrific sight and its greatest vulnerability. The Nuckelavee's breath was a weapon. It was called the mortar sheen, and it was a foul black mist that smelled of decay. This breath was believed to be the cause of plagues. When a mysterious illness swept through a village, killing both people and their animals, the islanders would whisper that the Nuckelavee had been seen nearby. When crops failed and a famine began, they knew the creature had breathed its poison over their fields. It was a harbinger of death and disaster. The Nuckelavee was said to hate everything pure and living. It was an agent of rot and decay, and its presence was an omen of the worst things to come. The only thing that could keep it at bay was fresh, running water. It could not cross a stream or a river. This was its one weakness, its one limitation. For the people of Orkney, a small burn or a freshwater loch was the only sanctuary from this monster. One of the most famous stories about the Nuckelavee involves a man named Thomas. Thomas was a farmer who lived on the island of Sanday. One evening he was walking home along a coastal path. The moon was full, casting a pale light over the landscape. As he walked, he became aware of a strange sound, a wet, slapping noise, like something large and heavy moving behind him. He quickened his pace, but the sound grew closer. He dared not look back, but he could feel a growing sense of dread. He could smell a foul stench on the air, like rotting fish and burnt soil. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, what was behind him. He chanced to look over his shoulder, and his heart nearly stopped. There it was, the Nuckelavee, its single red eye fixed on him. It was a chaotic mess of flesh and bone, a skinless rider on a skinless horse. The man torso on its back swayed grotesquely, its long arms almost scraping the ground. Thomas ran. He ran faster than he had ever run in his life. He could hear the creature's hooves pounding the earth behind him, getting closer with every second. He could feel its hot, putrid breath on the back of his neck. He knew his only hope was the Loch of Stennis, a body of fresh water that lay just ahead. As he reached the edge of the loch, he could hear the Nuckelavee right behind him. The creature reached out one of its long, sinewy arms, its sharp claws grazing his shoulder. Tamas leaped into the cold water, scrambling to the other side. He turned to look back and saw the Nuckelavee standing on the bank, roaring in frustration. It could not follow him into the fresh water. It stood there for a long time, its single eye burning with hatred, before it finally turned and galloped back towards the sea, disappearing into the darkness. Tamas was one of the few who were said to have encountered the Nuckelavee and lived to tell the tale. His story became a warning, a reminder of the horrors that could emerge from the sea on a moonlit night. The fear of the Nuckelavee was so real that people would not even say its name for fear of summoning it. They would perform rituals to keep it away, building bonfires and offering prayers, but the fear always remained. The Nuckelavee was a physical manifestation of the islanders' deepest anxieties: the unpredictable sea, the threat of disease, and the fragility of life in a harsh environment. It was a monster born of a very specific time and place, a creature of forgotten folklore that still holds the power to terrify. It reminds us that sometimes the oldest fears are the most powerful, and that the dark, cold water of the sea can hold more than just fish. From the cold shores of Scotland, we travel to the frozen landscapes of North America, to the forests of the Great Lakes region. Here, among the Algonquin peoples, there is a legend of a creature born not of the sea but of human desperation. It is a spirit of winter, a monster of insatiable hunger. This creature is known as the Wendigo. The Wendigo is not a monster you can fight with a sword or a gun. It is a supernatural entity, a spirit of cannibalism and greed. Its legend was a cautionary tale, a way to reinforce the taboo against eating human flesh, even in the most desperate of circumstances. The story goes that a Wendigo is created when a person resorts to cannibalism to survive. In the harsh winters of the north, when food was scarce, starvation was a very real threat. The temptation to eat a deceased companion could be strong, but to do so was to invite a terrible curse. The person who committed this act would be possessed by the spirit of the Wendigo. They would be transformed both physically and spiritually. Their body would become gaunt and emaciated, their skin stretched tight over their bones. Their eyes would sink deep into their sockets, glowing with a malevolent light. Their lips would be cracked and bloody, torn away from their constant gnawing. They would grow tall, unnaturally tall, some stories say as tall as the trees. They would be a horrifying caricature of their former selves, a walking skeleton with an insatiable hunger for human flesh. The more they ate, the hungrier they became. Their hunger was a spiritual sickness, a bottomless pit that could never be filled. The Wendigo was also a master of deception. It could mimic human voices, calling out to people lost in the woods, luring them to their doom. It could create phantom sounds, the cry of a baby or the scream of a woman, to draw its victims into a trap. It was said to be incredibly fast and strong, able to move through the forest without a sound. It was the perfect predator, a silent hunter that stalked its prey with relentless patience. The presence of a Wendigo was often preceded by a feeling of deep, unnatural cold. The air would grow still, and an eerie silence would fall over the forest. Those who felt this sudden chill knew that the Wendigo was near. There are many stories of encounters with the Wendigo, passed down through generations. One such story tells of a family of hunters who were trapped in their cabin by a severe blizzard. The storm lasted for weeks, and their food supply slowly dwindled. The father, a strong and respected hunter, grew more and more desperate. He had a wife and 2 young children to feed. One day he left the cabin, promising to return with food. He was gone for days. When he finally returned, he was changed. He was gaunt, and his eyes had a strange, wild look in them. He brought with him a large supply of meat, which he said was from a deer he had managed to kill. The family was overjoyed, and they ate heartily. But soon the wife began to notice strange things about her husband. He would stare into the fire for hours, his eyes glowing with an unsettling light. He would often go outside and stand in the snow, seemingly unaffected by the cold. One night, the wife woke up to a strange noise. She saw her husband standing over the children's bed, a knife in his hand. His face was twisted into a horrifying grin. She screamed, and he turned to her, his eyes burning with an unholy hunger. He was no longer her husband. He was a Wendigo. The story ends there, leaving the fate of the family to the imagination. It is a chilling reminder of the dark potential that lies within human nature and the terrible consequences of giving in to our most primal urges. The legend of the Wendigo was more than just a scary story. It was a complex psychological and cultural concept. It represented the dangers of greed and excess. The Wendigo's insatiable hunger was a metaphor for a person who takes more than they need, who consumes without regard for others or for the balance of nature. In a society that valued community and cooperation, the Wendigo was the ultimate symbol of selfishness. The story of the Wendigo also served as a way to understand and deal with the psychological trauma of starvation and survival cannibalism. By externalizing the horror into a monstrous entity, it provided a framework for understanding an unthinkable act. The person who committed the act was not seen as purely evil, but as a victim of a terrible spiritual affliction. The Wendigo is a creature that still haunts the imagination. It has become a staple of modern horror, appearing in books, movies, and video games. But its origins are much deeper and more complex than a simple monster. It is a powerful symbol of the darkness that can consume us when we are pushed to our limits. It is a reminder that the most terrifying monsters are often the ones that were once human. The forests of North America are vast and deep, and even today there are those who say they have felt the unnatural chill of the Wendigo's presence and have heard a familiar voice calling their name from the shadows between the trees. Now we travel to the lush tropical islands of the Philippines, a place rich with a vibrant and complex mythology. Here, among the countless spirits and monsters, there is one that is particularly feared. It is a creature that preys on the most vulnerable, a shapeshifter that hunts in the night. It is called the Aswang. The Aswang is not a single type of monster, but rather a category of creatures, similar to the Western concept of a vampire or a ghoul. There are many different types of Aswang, each with its own unique and terrifying characteristics, but they all share a common trait. They are creatures that were once human and they prey on the living. One of the most well-known types of Aswang is the manananggal. The manananggal is a horrifying creature that can sever its own torso. During the day it appears as a normal, often beautiful woman, but at night it goes to a secluded place, rubs a special oil on its body, and its upper torso detaches from its lower half. The upper torso then sprouts large, bat-like wings and flies off into the night, leaving its legs behind. The manananggal hunts for pregnant women, using its long, proboscis-like tongue to suck the fetus from the mother's womb. It is also known to prey on newlyweds and young children. Its call is said to be the sound of a tick-tick, a bird-like cry that is faint when the creature is close and loud when it is far away. This is a cruel trick to confuse its victims. To defeat a manananggal, one must find its abandoned lower torso. If you sprinkle salt or crushed garlic on the severed flesh, the upper torso will be unable to reattach. When the sun rises, the manananggal will be caught in its monstrous form and will be destroyed by the sunlight. The fear of the manananggal was so pervasive that pregnant women would take great precautions to protect themselves. They would hang cloves of garlic and strings of blessed salt around their windows and doors. They would avoid going out at night and would often sleep with a sharp bolo knife by their side. Another type of Aswang is the tick-tick, which is often associated with the manananggal. The tick-tick is a creature that is said to follow the manananggal, feeding on the remains of its victims. It is often described as a bird-like creature with long, sharp claws. The sound of the tick-tick is what gives the manananggal its confusing call. Then there is the wak-wak, another winged Aswang that is said to have sharp talons that can tear a person to shreds. The wak-wak is said to make a wak-wak sound as it flies, which is how it gets its name. It is also said to have a keen sense of smell, able to detect the scent of a sick person from a great distance. The Aswang is not just a monster that hunts from the sky. There are also ground-dwelling Aswang, such as the sigbin. The sigbin is a creature that is said to look like a cross between a goat, a dog, and a kangaroo. It has large flapping ears and a long tail that it can use like a whip. The sigbin walks backwards with its head lowered between its hind legs. It is a creature that is said to be owned by wealthy families who keep it in a clay jar and feed it with the blood of their enemies. In return, the sigbin brings them good fortune and protects them from harm. But if the sigbin is not fed, it will turn on its owners and devour them. The legend of the Aswang is a reflection of the social and cultural anxieties of the Philippines. It is a way to explain the unexplainable, such as miscarriages, sudden illnesses, and unexpected deaths. The Aswang is often depicted as a beautiful woman, which speaks to the fear of the unknown, the idea that danger can hide behind a familiar and attractive face. The Aswang is also a story about the importance of community. The creatures often prey on those who are isolated or alone. The stories of the Aswang reinforce the need to stay together, to protect one another, and to be wary of outsiders. Even in modern times, the belief in the Aswang is still very much alive in many parts of the Philippines. There are still people who will tell you stories of strange occurrences in their village, of a beautiful woman who was revealed to be a manananggal, or of a wealthy family who was rumored to keep a sigbin. The Aswang is a creature that has been passed down through generations, a part of the cultural fabric of the Philippines. It is a reminder that in a world of light and beauty, there are also shadows. And in those shadows, ancient fears can take flight. The Aswang is more than just a monster. It is a living piece of folklore, a primal fear that continues to haunt the tropical nights. From the tropical islands of the Philippines, we journey to the cold, dark forests of Germany. Here in the heart of Europe, there is a legend of a creature that is not quite a vampire, not quite a zombie, but something much more grotesque. It is a creature that rises from the grave, not to drink blood, but to consume the flesh of its own family. This undead horror is known as the Nachzehrer. The term Nachzehrer translates to after-devourer or night-devourer, and it perfectly describes the creature's gruesome habits. The legend of the Nachzehrer originated in the medieval period, a time when plagues and famine were a constant threat. When a person died of a sudden or mysterious illness, especially during an outbreak of a plague, it was sometimes believed that they would become a Nachzehrer. The process of becoming a Nachzehrer was thought to begin in the grave. After being buried, the corpse would not decompose in the normal way. Instead, it would begin to stir, to move, to chew. It would start by devouring its own burial shroud, then its own clothes, and then its own flesh. This act of self-cannibalism was believed to be the source of the creature's power. As the Nachzehrer consumed itself in the grave, it would drain the life force from its living relatives. One by one, the family members of the deceased would fall ill and die, their life essence being magically drawn into the undead creature in the grave. This was how the Nachzehrer fed. It did not need to leave its coffin to kill. Its evil was a plague that spread from the grave, wiping out entire families. The Nachzehrer was different from a vampire in several key ways. It was not a creature that sought to spread its curse by biting others. Its goal was simply to consume, to feed its unnatural hunger. It was also not a creature of seduction or cunning. It was a mindless, ravenous entity, driven by a single, all-consuming need. The signs of a Nachzehre's presence were a series of unexplained deaths in a family, usually starting shortly after a loved one was buried. As the family members weakened and died, the townspeople would grow suspicious. They would believe that the first person to die was a Nachzehrer, and that they were the cause of the spreading sickness. To stop a Nachzehrer, the townspeople would have to exhume the body. This was a grim and terrifying task. When they opened the coffin, they would often find a corpse that was bloated and fresh, its skin ruddy, and its nails and hair grown long. The most telling sign was the state of the burial shroud. If it was chewed and torn, and if the corpse's mouth was open, with bits of cloth and flesh still inside, then they knew they had found their monster. There were several methods for destroying a Nachzehrer. One was to place a stone or a brick in the corpse's mouth. This was to prevent it from chewing any further. Another method was to place a coin under its tongue, which was believed to be a way to satisfy its hunger. The most common and effective method, however, was decapitation. The head of the Nachzehrer would be cut off with a spade and the body would be reburied. This was believed to be the only way to permanently sever the creature's connection to its living relatives and to end the plague of death. There have been several archaeological discoveries that seem to support the historical belief in the Nachzehrer. In Venice, a 16th century skull was found with a brick forced into its mouth. The woman was buried in a mass grave from a plague outbreak, and archaeologists believe that this was a ritual to prevent her from becoming a Nachzehrer and feeding on the other plague victims. Similar graves have been found in other parts of Europe, with bodies that have been staked, decapitated, or had stones placed in their mouths. These discoveries provide a chilling glimpse into the very real fear that people had of the undead. The legend of the Nachzehrer is a fascinating example of how folklore is used to explain and cope with real-world horrors. In a time before modern medicine, a plague was a terrifying and inexplicable event. The Nachzehrer provided an explanation, a scapegoat for the seemingly random and cruel nature of disease. It was a way to take control of a situation that felt uncontrollable. By identifying and destroying the Nachzehrer, the community could feel like they were fighting back against the sickness, that they were doing something to protect themselves. The Nachzehrer is a creature born from the fear of death and disease, a monster that lurks not in the shadows of the forest, but in the sanctity of the grave. It is a reminder that sometimes the greatest horrors are the ones that we bury, and that even in death the hunger for life can take on a monstrous form. The Nachzehrer is a forgotten creature of folklore, a testament to a time when the line between the living and the dead was believed to be terrifyingly thin. Our journey into the world of forgotten folklore now takes us to the vast, arid landscapes of Australia. Here, among the Aboriginal peoples, there are stories that are as old as the land itself. These are not just scary stories, but a part of a complex spiritual tradition known as the dreaming. In the dreaming, there are many powerful and dangerous creatures, but one of the most bizarre and unsettling is the Yaramayahu. The Yaramayahu is a creature that is said to live in the fig trees of the Australian bush. It is a small creature, about 4 feet tall, with red skin and a large hairless head. It has a massive mouth with no teeth, and its hands and feet are shaped like the suckers of an octopus. The Yaramayahu is not a creature that hunts in the traditional sense. It does not chase its prey or attack with claws and teeth. Instead, it is a creature of patience and stealth. It will wait in its fig tree for an unsuspecting person to rest in the shade below. When its victim is relaxed and off guard, the Yaramayahu will drop down from the branches and attach its sucker-like hands and feet to the person's body. It will then use these suckers to drain the person's blood. It does not kill its victim immediately. Instead, it will drain just enough blood to weaken them, to make them unable to resist. Once the victim is weak and helpless, the Yaramayahu will swallow them whole. It has a large, gaping mouth that can stretch to accommodate an entire person. After swallowing its meal, the Yaramayahu will take a long nap. When it wakes up, it will regurgitate the person, who will be alive but much smaller than before. The Yaramayahu will then repeat this process over and over again. Each time the person is swallowed and regurgitated, they become smaller and their skin becomes redder. Eventually, they will be transformed into a Yaramayahu themselves. The legend of the Yaramayahu was a cautionary tale for children, a way to teach them to be wary of strangers and to not wander off into the bush alone. The story of being slowly transformed into one of the creatures was a particularly terrifying prospect, a fate worse than death. The only way to protect oneself from a Yaramayahu was to be vigilant. If you were traveling in the bush, you were told to never rest under a fig tree, especially during the heat of the day. If you saw a small red creature in the branches above, you were to run and not look back. The Yaramayahu is a unique and fascinating creature in the world of folklore. It is not a creature of pure evil, but rather a strange, almost parasitic being. Its method of reproduction, by transforming its victims into more of its kind, is a chilling concept. It is a creature that represents the fear of losing oneself, of being slowly and methodically changed into something monstrous. The story of the Yaramayahu is a reminder that the Australian outback is a place of great beauty, but also of great danger. It is a land with a deep and ancient history, a history that is filled with stories of strange and powerful beings. The Yaramayahu is just one of these beings, a small red creature with a very big appetite, a forgotten monster that still lurks in the shade of the fig trees, waiting for its next meal. From the ancient land of Australia, we travel to the green hills and misty bogs of Ireland. This is a land steeped in folklore, a place where the veil between our world and the other world is said to be thin. It is home to fairies, leprechauns, and a host of other supernatural beings. But not all of these beings are friendly. Some are harbingers of death, their cries a chilling omen of a coming tragedy. The most famous of these is the Banshee. The Banshee, or Bean Cedar in Irish, which means woman of the fairy mound, is a female spirit whose cry is said to herald the death of a family member. She is not a creature that causes death, but rather a messenger who announces it. Her mournful wail is a warning, a lament for a life that is about to be lost. The appearance of the Banshee varies in different stories. Sometimes she is described as a beautiful young woman with long flowing hair and a ghostly white gown. Other times, she is an old haggard woman with a skeletal face, long sharp teeth, and eyes that are red from weeping. She is often seen combing her long hair with a silver comb, an act that is said to be a sign of her grief. No matter her form, her presence is always accompanied by a sense of profound sadness and an overwhelming feeling of dread. The cry of the Banshee is her most defining feature. It is a sound that is said to be unlike any other on Earth. It is a high-pitched wailing scream that can be heard for miles. It is a sound that is filled with so much sorrow and despair that it can chill a person to the bone. To hear the cry of the Banshee is to know that death is coming for someone in your family. The Banshee is said to be attached to certain ancient Irish families, those with the O or Mac prefix in their names. These are the families that are believed to be of pure Irish descent. It was said that each of these families had its own Banshee, a spirit that had been watching over them for generations. When a member of one of these families was about to die, whether at home or far away, the Banshee would appear and let out her mournful cry. The cry could be heard by the family, a supernatural death notice that prepared them for the coming loss. There are countless stories of encounters with the Banshee in Irish folklore. One story tells of a man who was walking home late one night when he heard a strange wailing sound coming from a nearby field. He looked over the stone wall and saw a young woman with long red hair sitting on a rock and weeping. As he got closer, he saw that her face was pale and her eyes were filled with an otherworldly sadness. He asked her what was wrong, but she did not answer. She simply continued to cry, her wail growing louder and more sorrowful. The man, feeling uneasy, continued on his way home. The next morning, he received news that his brother, who was working in England, had died in a tragic accident the night before. He then understood that the woman he had seen was the Banshee, and her cry was a lament for his lost brother. Another story tells of an old woman who lived alone in a small cottage. One night, she was awoken by a tapping at her window. When she looked out, she saw a skeletal old woman with long grey hair, her face pressed against the glass. The old woman's eyes were red, and she was crying silent tears. The woman in the cottage was terrified, but she knew what the apparition meant. The next day, her son, who was a fisherman, was lost at sea. The Banshee had come to warn her of the tragedy. The legend of the Banshee is a powerful and enduring part of Irish culture. She is a figure that is both feared and respected. She is a reminder of the inevitability of death, but also of the deep bonds of family. Her cry is a testament to the idea that even in death we are not alone, that there are ancient spirits who watch over us and grieve for our passing. The Banshee is more than just a ghost story. She is a symbol of Irish identity, a connection to a mystical past where the worlds of the living and the dead were intertwined. Even today, in the quiet, rural parts of Ireland, there are those who claim to have heard the mournful cry of the Banshee, a chilling and unforgettable sound that echoes through the misty night, a timeless lament for the souls of the Irish. Our final journey into the realm of forgotten folklore takes us to the cold northern lands of Scandinavia. Here, in the land of Vikings and long, dark winters, there is a belief in a type of undead that is different from the mindless zombies or the aristocratic vampires of other cultures. This creature is known as the Draugr. The Draugr is an animated corpse, a dead body that continues to live on in its grave. But unlike a simple ghost, the Draugr has a physical body. It is a creature of immense strength, able to increase its size and weight at will. It is said to have the ability to pass through solid rock, and it can control the weather, creating storms and darkness. The Draugr is a malevolent creature, filled with a burning hatred for the living. The Draugr were often created from the bodies of powerful or greedy individuals. A Viking warrior who was buried with his treasure was likely to become a Draugr, rising from his burial mound to guard his wealth. A person who was cruel or unpopular in life could also return as a Draugr, seeking to continue their reign of terror from beyond the grave. The Draugr's appearance was as terrifying as its powers. It was often described as being bloated and blue-black in color, the color of death. Its eyes were said to glow with an evil light, and it had the strength of many men. It was also said to have a foul stench, the reek of the grave. The Draugr was a creature of great cunning. It was not a mindless beast, but an intelligent and vengeful spirit. It would often leave its burial mound at night to terrorize the local community. It would kill livestock, drive people mad with fear, and even kill those who were unfortunate enough to cross its path. The Draugr was a formidable opponent. It was immune to most weapons, and its great strength made it nearly impossible to fight. It was also said to have the ability to shapeshift, often taking the form of a cat, a horse, or a bull. There are many stories of the Draugr in the Norse sagas. One of the most famous is the story of Thorolf Twistfoot, a cruel and powerful Viking chieftain. In life, Thorolf was a tyrant, and in death he became a powerful Draugr. He haunted his old farm, killing his own son and many of his servants. He would ride on the rooftops of the houses, his heavy steps causing the buildings to shake. The people of the valley lived in constant fear of him. Finally, a hero named Thorod came to face the Draugr. The two fought a long and brutal battle inside Thorolf's burial mound. Thorod eventually managed to defeat the Draugr by cutting off its head and placing it at the creature's buttocks. He then burned the body to ashes and scattered them in the sea. This was the only way to ensure that the Draugr would not return. The legend of the Draugr reflects the harsh realities of life in ancient Scandinavia. It was a world where death was a constant presence and where the fear of the unknown was very real. The Draugr was a manifestation of this fear. It was a way to personify the dangers of the long, dark winters, and the idea that the dead did not always rest peacefully. The burial mounds that dot the Scandinavian landscape were seen as places of great power, but also of great danger. They were the homes of the dead, and to disturb them was to risk waking the Draugr that lay within. The Draugr is a creature that has had a lasting impact on popular culture. It is the ancestor of the modern zombie, and its influence can be seen in countless books, movies, and video games. But the original Draugr of Norse mythology was much more than just a walking corpse. It was a powerful and intelligent being, a terrifying force of nature that embodied the darkest fears of the Viking Age. The Draugr is a reminder that some legends are so powerful, so primal, that they can survive for centuries, their chilling stories echoing down through the ages, a testament to the enduring power of forgotten folklore. From the skinless horseman of Scotland to the cannibal spirit of North America, from the winged terror of the Philippines to the grave dweller of Germany, from the blood-sucking creature of Australia to the wailing spirit of Ireland and the undead warrior of Scandinavia, we have explored just a few of the terrifying creatures that have haunted the human imagination for centuries. These are the monsters that time has forgotten, but their stories are a powerful reminder of the primal fears that unite us all. They are the creatures of our nightmares, the dark and twisted reflections of our own anxieties. And though we may live in a world of science and reason, there is still a part of us that looks into the darkness and wonders what might be looking back.